Hello, everyone, here on our UGA Sports YouTube channel. I am Dane Young from UGAsports.com alongside Brent Rollins from Pro Football Focus. He is also the co-author of Film Don't Lie on UGAsports.com with me. And we are continuing our NFL draft breakdown of Georgia football players and where they project to go in next week's NFL draft. If you go back on our channel, about 2 weeks ago, we did an initial breakdown of Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell and DJ Daniel. Georgia's three cornerbacks are in the draft. We're going to stay on the defensive side of the football, go to the middle of the defense with Richard LeCounte and Mark Webb, Monty Rice at linebacker, and Malik Herring on the defensive line. That'll leave us four more that we'll do in next week's show. Brent, I know you've been traveling all over the place for some family things, but have you been able to keep track of some of the rumors happening around the NFL draft? Because this is when it starts getting a little dicey.
As much as I can, because it's what is it, like maybe 90% of what you hear now is probably just out there just to be out there, just to get a conversation started. You never know who to believe or what to believe at this point. Who's rising, who's falling. By the way, nobody has played a game yet. People rise, people fall. You read about how Devontae Smith weighed in at 166 and, Tutu Atwell at 149. That came out there today. Might be like the lightest player drafted in forever, it seems like I saw. So very much trying to keep up as much as we can. But the best thing that you said there was next week's draft. We talk about it so much, and there's not anything to do in that sort of in that time frame from when the season ends to the draft. If free agency is a little bit fun, but that we spend so much time on the draft. Now it's finally here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think one of the things at this point is NFL teams know what they want to do. It's all about what the other teams in the league allow them to do in terms of their game plans and strategies. And that's what's kind of fun to develop from like a personnel standpoint. And what is the PR game? Does San Francisco, do the 49ers really have a plan at 3? Of course, we both think they do. They wouldn't have traded up. And then what is that plan? How does it impact the Falcons and the phone calls they're making? Because I guarantee you there's a lot of contingent trades out there. Maybe something like for the Falcons, if this player is here at 4, we'd probably like to take them. If this player is not there at 4, we'll probably be interested in trading down. I'm sure that those contingencies are happening.
Yes, and that one to me is the most. Is the story of the draft right now, because it just seems set in stone that it's Trevor 1, Zach Wilson 2, and you think about a lot of the just ESPN in general and the people that report and what they talk about on the daily shows, all those sort of things. It's probably not very interesting and good for your product if it's a known thing that 1, 2, and 3 are these players. You want some intrigue. You want eyeballs on your broadcast. So who knows what to believe in terms of people that say, all right, if they went up for Mac Jones, or that that's not necessarily the case, that Fields is to play, or even Trey Lance. I'm looking forward to seeing it, because it makes the Falcons pick way much more intriguing, I think, if Mac Jones goes 3.
Yeah, absolutely does. The first round is where the TV ratings come to play, but championships are won later in the draft when the contract management comes up and who can be a contributor for this. You hear all the time that the value in second round, really even getting down to 5th round, if you can find a gem there that works for a team. And not every player works for every team. But that's why we're talking about the guys that we are. And we've got 4 players we're talking about from UGA today. Let's start with Richard LeCounte, and I'm going to share my screen here, and like we did in our previous episode, where we have our projections of where these players are going to go from Daniel Jeremiah. So we start with Richard LeCounte, 5'11", 190 pounds, from Liberty County High School in Riceboro, Georgia, down on the southeast part of the state. Richard played in 44 games at Georgia, 176 tackles. He had 8 interceptions and 6 fumbles recovered. Daniel Jeremiah, when Jim Donnan and I initially spoke with him about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, had Richard LeCounte going in the 3rd or 4th round. Now, I think, Brent, from what you and I have seen, that's likely going to drop a little bit based on his workouts. However, he's still recovering from some injuries as well, so maybe some teams look past that. To me, the thing that stands out about Richard LeCounte are the turnover ratios, the 8 interceptions and 6 fumbles recovered. I think he forced 4 as well. That's got to be something NFL teams look at and say, okay, there is something special with this guy.
Yeah, because it's always the measurables versus the tape and what you see on film. And when we talk about those measurables, I'm going to hit mine real quick too, because Ken Platt on Twitter does this thing called the relative athletic score. And if you look at LeCount's score, it's not good. Now, granted, that's from the times at the pro day. He's still, like you said, battling the injuries. But when you think about over a period of that long, 1987 to 2021, that you're that low on that count. And when you think about some others like Eric Stokes, I think we showed this in the last time, was 9.99 on this same scale. So, he's going to have to overcome that. But then you put on the tape and you see someone consistently in the game who recognizes upstairs and is that much quicker, or a half step or a step quicker, because of recognition, because of just experience and high level upstairs, that he plays probably in the 4-6 range, that kind of thing. So what does a team look at and say, all right, can we overlook some of the measurables to be like, all right, we're getting a really, really good player, someone that Daniel Jeremiah talked about, red star flag,
red star player,
red star player, that, hey, this is somebody we want on our team. Can you be a special teams contributor? I do think from a round projection, it's going to cost, the measurable part is going to cost him. I think Dane Brugler, that for the Athletic, did a 7-round mock, and he had LeCount at 215th pick. So late, 6th, 7th round type deal. Still yet, when you think about his career, he played really, really well, always around the ball, 90 overall career grade, 90.2 coverage grade in his career, which is over 2,000 snaps. So he's played a lot of football, and you're just getting a guy, if you take him in those later rounds, that you want on your team, and is, like you said, has a penchant for making big plays and or finding himself around the ball or creating turnovers.
Well, and this is where the value of the rounds and how the economy of the NFL draft works. Because if Richard LeCount were to be drafted in the 3rd or 4th round, what a team is saying is, we're going to need you to contribute in our secondary as a safety.
And/or start.
Or
Start as a rookie. Heavily contribute / start as a rookie.
If you get drafted in the 6th or 7th round, what it's saying is there may be a path to get playing time if you go earn it, but we have lower expectations. And if you can contribute on special teams, then you're worth a spot on the roster. But one thing that I think a lot of people forget is that NFL rosters are so much smaller than college rosters. So you cannot have wasted spaces. If you can't play, you're not going to be there.
No. And I think you're definitely going to find the team that picks him. I don't think he goes through this draft, and I don't think he doesn't get drafted. I think he gets picked. But I do think it's at best probably late 5th round.
Yeah, I kind of think 5th or 6th round based on the composite of what we've seen. If he would have worked out better, I think he could have stayed around the 4th round projection. 3rd's probably a bit too high just based on the injury and what he's recovering from, and then what he was able to do physically. I try not to punish players coming off injuries that still go through the workout process, because so many players don't do that. And so good for him for getting out there and trying, but it may come to his detriment a little bit. And one thing that we were talking about beforehand, for all of these guys that we're talking about today, the main goal is, how do you get to your second contract in the NFL? How do you prove that you, as a proven commodity within 2 to 3 years, are more valuable than the kind of hope trafficking that happens during the draft? And so for LeCount, it's going to be, how do you stay on a roster? Because we both agree that he's going to find his way to a roster.
Very much so. I agree.
I'm going to share my screen again, and let's chat about Mark Webb, who played the star position for Georgia. One interesting thing, this is a perception thing I didn't realize, but Mark Webb played in more Georgia football games than Richard LeCount. 5 more. Some of that's because of LeCount's injury in the 2020 season. Some of that is because Mark Webb played on special teams as much as he did early on. So he didn't play much in some of those early games, but 49 games for Mark Webb, 82 tackles and 1 interception. He is 6'1", 200 pounds, from Archbishop Wood High School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Obviously, the family connection to DeAndre Swift. In Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft that we've been discussing, he had Mark Webb as a late pick or undrafted, and typically that's kind of in the same range that we were talking about with LeCount, that 6th or 7th, and then if not, then he'll get to choose where his opportunity is from there.
And I think he's an interesting scenario or sort of player because of not necessarily how he projects. When you think about how he projects to the NFL game, he doesn't project to the NFL game where he played in college. He doesn't project as a slot corner. It's not his skill set, I don't think. Now
he's not quick enough for that.
And he went right, and it's when you look at he was very solid, a great in terms of grades. He had a 73.1 overall grade, 72.5 coverage grade during his time at Georgia, but still had a 105.8 rating into his coverage, passer rating. So teams attacked him consistently, but you went to the Senior Bowl and he did a lot of work at safety. But then also when you think about what the NFL is transitioning to, a lighter, get faster people on the field, especially in the box. Like you think about what Keanu Neal just signed with, I think Dallas, right? I think he signed with Dallas to go reunite Dan Quinn. But I bet he ends up playing a lot of lines. I think he signed as a linebacker and is going to end up playing a lot as a linebacker or a third down, in the box player. And because of Webb's tackling ability, his entire career is tackles. And his right around 90 in terms of tackling grade over his career because of his physical presence. And when you think about like some of the key plays that he had at Georgia, I always think about him in the box making plays either on the edge in bubble type screen game or in the box in the running game. I think he can find himself in that role. He's going to be a special teams player and find a roster spot. I think Dane Brugler had him at 220. So look, 5 picks after LeCount in his 7-round mock. So, in terms of, and he's not necessarily on our big top 300 big board, but at PFF, but I think he finds a spot, and I just think that's where he finds his role is this, dime backer, box type safety or something. And then eventually gets into that realm.
You kept saying the word physical there, and we're not just shilling for Georgia players. I do think that LeCount and Webb are both going to be relying on the fact that they are instinctual players, but also that they're aggressive as defenders and they're not afraid to go put their nose in a pile, get the hard hit, make the tackle in the box. I think that'll be helpful for both of them. I will say that Richard LeCounte's tackling form probably hurt him a little bit over time, where he would miss some tackles or slide off from some players.
Trying to make the big hit.
Yeah, Mark Webb didn't do that as much. Mark Webb was really efficient, wrapped up, was really good, especially between the hashes and the sidelines. Once he got around the box a little bit, he just didn't quite have the size to kind of maneuver like he would sometimes. But anything around the edge, hash and beyond, very valuable in run defense. And like you said with the league, where the little quick passes and things to the edge to get receivers in space, you need that because there are so many plays now that kind of mimic running plays on the edge.
And you look at his career too. It started out a receiver. He was recruited as a receiver and then played defensive back. He still had 3 dropped interceptions, unfortunately, in his career. But he did force 11 incompletions. And that's kind of that's always that old saying. But him, based on what you hear about the kid himself, I just think he finds himself on a roster. I don't see him not being on a roster come fall. Now, is it just because of wrong team? And if he's somebody who's not drafted, and that might be to his advantage, because when you're not drafted, then I get to pick where I go and who I sign with. And now you've got people who are helping you and say, look, I can look at depth charts of these 3 teams that are interested. And I find myself, this team's looking at me here, look at their depth chart. I find a spot there. And it might be beneficial to him in that route versus being picked in the 7th round type deal.
That's one of the things that if you are a 7th round pick, what that function serves for the team is saying we don't want to have to compete with the other teams on the undrafted free agency market. Some players have great careers after that. Some players get picked in the 7th round and are fine. It's kind of the last thing of saying this is our control in this situation. But we see every year in camp that 7th round picks get cut and you can get drafted there and you play for 2 more teams before you actually touch the field in terms of scout team and everything else. Because the process of selecting rosters in the NFL is quite brutal. And I think I know it's dramatized because it's television, but I think it's one of the things Hard Knocks has done very well is kind of put a face and a voice to that process. Cause it's brutal, man, when these guys work as long as they have and you get drafted and then you get cut before you get to play with the team that drafted you.
You think about that late round and then the undrafted part. Those you definitively have to. This is not a question. You have to be able to contribute on special teams, unless you're a quarterback, and even then sometimes. But as a holder, but you have to be able to contribute on special teams. And in his career, over the 4 years, over 230 special team snaps for him, both on kick coverage, punt return. So it's something he has done. He could say, "Look, I have done it and done it well." So that's don't fear putting me in on the special teams type work.
It's funny how the connections work out too, because if he is undrafted, you obviously have to think, all right, well, maybe he would go to Detroit where he has family connections with DeAndre Swift. But even beyond that, just all the players that he played with at Georgia, they're going to be guys that will be able to vouch for him and say, hey, bring him in, athletic guy, he's got a shot. Yeah. So if it's 7th round, I'm with you. I think he'd rather be undrafted at that point. Let's move on to our next player. That's Monty Rice, 6'1", 230 pounds from James Clemens High School in Huntsville, Alabama. He played 47 games for Georgia in a bit of an unenvious spot, I would say, following what Roquan Smith did in the same position. 219 tackles, 2 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. Daniel Jeremiah had him going in the 4th or 5th round of the NFL draft. I'll say this because I think in a lot of coverage, Richard LeCount gets a lot of credit for being among those early recruits for Kirby Smart and helping set the culture when Kirby Smart became Georgia's head coach. It was massive when Monty Rice came to UGA from Alabama. That was saying, okay, I trust what you're doing here. I've got other options. I could go other places. Pulling players out of the state of Alabama was tough at Georgia, and now it's become a trend when you look at a George Pickens and Clay Webb. A lot of that's rooted in Monty Rice having success and being the team leader that he became. Now, I think Monty Rice is an NFL player, but I do think he has deficiencies in his game, mainly some speed, a little bit of pursuit, but he is a physical tackler, and we saw a lot of glimpses of that. More of a steady player, and I think the NFL wants explosive players from that position.
And the benefit, he ran well at the UGA Pro Day, and that was a big benefit to him. I think he was right around 4'6", 4'5", maybe something like that. And having at least that time put out there was big for him, because if you play linebacker in the league, you have to cover. You have to be able to cover. And you can be a great tackler. You can be a physical, like Kenny Britt, for example, from Auburn. He's going to have to prove he can cover. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to do those things in the NFL now, because it's such a passing league. And he had a 71.5 career coverage grade. Even as a pass rusher, he had 17 total quarterback pressures on, I think, right around 120 pass rush snaps. So very effective. And we think of, just plays of his career, the strip sack fumble return for TD against Tennessee this past season, kind of first thing to mind for me with him. And I think when you look at him in terms of rank, he's 110th on the PFF big board, the 10th highest linebacker. He's going to find himself, what's going to happen is, depending upon the run and other positions, and I think we talked about this with the cornerback spot as well. If there's a massive run on wide receivers and you see a half of a 20-pick stretch be on wide receivers, it's going to push him down a little bit. But I still think he finds himself in that somewhere right around that 4th round range, maybe into the 5th round. On Dane Bluger's 7-round mock, he went 201st to the Giants, which the Giants is an intriguing team.
We know they love UGA players already there. Judge and his connections with that coaching staff.
And they already have a UGA linebacker in tow, and Tay Crowder. So, that would be kind of interesting if that ended up where he, or indeed that was where he ended up with the New York Giants. So,
Derek Dooley, I think
he's going to get drafted.
Derek Dooley is the tight end coach there now, and Jeremy Pruitt is roaming around Manhattan, I guess, these days, which is very weird. All those guys with connections to UGA. We had a discussion.
Andrew Thomas.
We had a discussion on Tuesday's UGA Sports Live about the evolution of the tight end position. And I was asking Jake Roos about, are tight ends being used differently in high school? And he was pretty much saying if you have freaks like a Darnell Washington or an Eric Gilbert, something like that, then yeah, they're being used differently. But one of the things that you're seeing is because the passing game is exploding, that players are actually kind of seeking to play tight end because they think they can get the ball that way, especially if they are a little bit bigger in stature. And what you were saying about Monty Rice having to cover and how that's something that inside linebackers have to be able to do. Let's say, for instance, he gets drafted by the Denver Broncos. What that's saying is if you're a 4th-round pick, inside linebacker for the Denver Broncos, we trust you that you can do something against Travis Kelce.
Something. Even though most can't.
That's about all any player can do because he's just such a good route runner, so physical, so dynamic, and the best quarterback in the game is throwing the ball to him. But that's an important point to make, that I would feel really good about Monty Rice in coverage in front of him, helping with the run. It's when he has to backpedal that I get a little concerned.
It's the in space, because when you look at his time at UGA, there are multiple instances, one against Alabama this past year, a couple last year, where even Arkansas, I think in the first game, where his recognition and closing speed on the screens in front of him was exceptional. It's now when you got to drop back and you got to play true middle of the field, 10, 12 yards down the field, that's when you maybe, all right, we got to get better at that. But I do think he's going to, given the times, given the measurables, he's going to find himself in that 4th, 5th round range and have to go do those things and go show that he can do those things and evolve as a player. And if he does, he'll stick around.
Do you remember the play that Roquan Smith, the aforementioned Roquan Smith, had against Auburn where he was covering in the corner of the end zone? I think it was against a running back out of the backfield or something like that. I remember it in my head. I feel like that made Roquan even more money to supplant himself, in the top 12 picks because he had the ability to do that. Because, you were talking 25 yards down the field, good coverage without getting pass interference. It's just not many linebackers can do that. And that's one linebacker that we did forget with the Giants, Tay Crowder.
Right. That's to me, that's what got Tay Crowder drafted, was his ability to cover and play in space.
Yeah.
And that's what he did this season for the Giants and had a good season doing it.
Yeah, that's a 7th-round pick, Mr. Relevant, right? He made the most of that opportunity, and I think he's well on his way to a second contract because of his athleticism and his versatility. So maybe that's a guy that gets reunited with Monty Rice if the draft that you referenced comes true. Any final thoughts on Monty before we move over to Malik Herring?
No.
We covered it well. We did our jobs. I like that.
Yes.
Malik Herring, 6'3", 280 pounds, from Forsyth, Georgia. That was Mary Persons High School. Very productive career at Georgia, playing in 52 football games, 76 tackles. He had 4 sacks and was really kind of a force, I would say, at least in terms of having his place on the defensive line and holding it for multiple years. Hard thing to do in the SEC, and he didn't just hold it. He played very well and was a stable force for Georgia. Daniel Jeremiah had him drafted in the 5th round, and we are obviously aware that he is coming off the ACL injury at the Senior Bowl, which, man, we all just felt horrible and brutal for him, and hope he's doing well in that recovery. That's going to impact his draft status. There's no way that it won't. If you're a 1st-round pick talent and you tear your ACL, some teams would be willing to do that because the upside's there. But when you're looking at, 4th to 7th round guys, that's just too much of a risk to take when you need help now.
When you think about 2 years ago, I think, the Simmons kid from Mississippi State that had an ACL or some form of knee injury and still got picked, I think, 20th by the Titans, right around 20th by the Titans in the 1st round. That was where the talent, he's a top 6, 7, 8 guy normally, but the injury pushed him down. When you're, a 3rd-ish, maybe 4th round guy and you have that injury, now you're looking at 5th, 6th, now you're looking at those last 3 rounds of the draft. And will someone look at the tape and be like, okay, I believe in what's there and what's going to be there? Personally, like, you think about what the Falcons did last year in the 2nd round, taking Marlon Davidson. I think he's a better version of him in terms of the ability to play both on the edge and then also slide inside on pass rush downs and on 3rd down. That's what I think he's going to, once he gets back to health and finds a team, whether that be picked, I think in the 7th round mock, or in the 7th round mock, Bruler had him at 247. So in the 7th round.
I think Davidson probably had a little bit better foot speed and workouts, and obviously we didn't get to see what Herring had there. But if you're playing that close to the ball, does that really matter all the time?
No, and that's where you look at that things like 3-cone and in your 10-yard splits, all those kind of things. But just a highly productive player, well, not from a productive grading, because when you think about production, a lot of people think of stacks and pressures and things like that. But he was always beating defenders and then, balls out kind of thing, where he's just consistently beating defenders, making things happen, but not necessarily getting a sack, not necessarily, making a big stop, but always there, always winning a lot of his one-on-one battles. 90 overall career grade, 84.6 career pass rush grade. He had 77 total quarterback pressures, 15% win rate, which is actually quite high. So, consistent play. When I think back to some of the plays where, like against Landon Young against Kentucky at home in the rain last year, or not this past year, but the previous season, just absolutely destroying him into a holding penalty. So, you're going to get into a sack there, but, you get held. So those kind of things with him, I think, happened a lot. But I think he finds himself a spot in the league as a guy who can play on the edge, even maybe in a 3-4, like a Steelers type defense, and then kick inside as a tackle on a pass rush down. So hopefully that's where he finds himself. Hopefully he gets healthy and finds himself in the league somewhere, getting that spot, like you said, working towards that second contract.
I think when you look at Malik Herring's most impressive game tape, I think he should be pushing out the Sugar Bowl against Baylor. He was quite a force in the trenches in that game. And like you said, it doesn't always appear in the stats, but he was occupying a ton of space and really helped shut down any kind of inside run that Baylor had and forced their hand to pass. And it caused some turnovers in that way where, there were some passes that were probably a little ill-advised, and Georgia got some interceptions off of that. That's all part of how the dynamics of the defense work, that, if a ball gets thrown up, it's usually because other things weren't available. And he was a big reason why that was the case in that particular game.
And he's always he's the true kind of tweener right now with the NFL, where he's a little bit, at 280, 275, he's not a true, and he's not 6'5", so he's not like a true edge guy. Versus he's not 290, 295, 300, and a true interior guy. He's a little bit of both. And that versatility is going to have to find a team that values that versatility, being able to play both on the edge and then moving inside as a pass rusher.
One thing with a guy like him, let's say if a team thought that he was a 4th round pick, or maybe between 4th and 5th, and they're already really solid at his position. So defensive end, they're already really solid there. They've got 2 or 3 guys that they like, they feel comfortable with. They've got a good history of health. If that same team then can look up in the 6th or 7th round and say, okay, this is a higher level of talent than we would have normally gotten. He's only here because of the injury, but we're willing to bring him in and wait a year and let him recover from that. Maybe he can contribute late in the season. That's fine. But we're not going to kind of put our team's plans into that. That can really be beneficial for him, because more than likely, if it's a team that's solidified at that spot, they're going to be a good team anyway. And so he'll kind of get to learn from those habits and get involved with those coaches. So yeah, I can see him having a really good position going to a team, because he's going to be a high value for a team that has at least the ability to be patient with him in his recovery.
And I think you look at all 4 of these guys. When you talk about like you talk about George Pickens of the world, the Kyle Pitts of the world, some of those high-end first-round guys, they're going to be successful no matter where they go for the most part, because their talent is just trumps all that. But when you look at the later rounds, you think of guys like I can't remember exactly where he was picked, but I know he was picked by the Bears and has had a successful run with the Bears. Eddie Jackson, that played at Alabama. Yeah, I think he was a 4th, 5th round pick. And much like LeCount, but went into a situation with a defense that was very good around him, where he could sort of use his ball hawking skills and make plays on the ball. And now he's a high level player in the NFL. That situation is going to matter big time for these guys, and the ability to, like you said, find the spot for Herring where teams value that versatility, or find a spot with Monty Rice or even with Mark Webb where, hey, we look at you in this realm and we think we're going to accentuate what you do well. If that happens for these guys in these later rounds, I think they're all going to be successful and stay in the league for, at least through that first contract and maybe even where they get the second contract.
All right, let's wrap this with my favorite game. This guy feels like blank. And so the example that I still, man, when we said this in our previous episode, Eric Stokes feels like a Charger. He feels like a player for the Chargers. I mean, that's perfect. So let's start with Malik Herring. Malik Herring feels like
a Patriot to me. He feels like a Patriot because they value versatility on the defense, being able to move around and play a bunch of different spots. Belichick's a known affectionate for Nick Saban, Kirby Smart type players. I think he feels like a Patriot to me.
I like that. I was going to say Chiefs because I think they would have the ability to be patient there and potentially have a gem in a year or two. And he kind of fits a little bit of that D Ford mold that they had a couple of years ago. I mean, D Ford is an animal athletically, a little bit quicker, but somewhere in that vein. Those two franchises are similar in what they do on defensive line. Monty Rice feels like
a Bear.
Okay.
Feels like a Chicago Bear. Put him right beside Roquan. Let Roquan be cover guy. Let him be physical guy.
I had him with the Buccaneers being kind of like the guy that comes off the bench should something happen to the Buccaneers at the top of the order there. Do I still have you, Brent? I think our connection may have. Right in the middle of my favorite game as well. All right, so Brent's power went out. So I'll finish this really quickly and wrap. So Mark Webb, to me, does feel like a Baltimore Raven. That physical tackler, I like that from him. And then Richard LeCounte, I'm going to say LeCount feels like an Indianapolis Colt, and I'd like to see him play on that turf as well. Brent's power going out means this was a good time for us to wrap the show, and we're going to do that anyway. We'll recap this guy feels like in next week's episode. We will talk about the two Georgia offensive linemen with Ben Cleveland and Trey Hill, along with Azeez Ojulari, who will be Georgia's top drafted player in the first round. And, Brent's coming back right now. Look at this. This is ingenuity on his phone.
Yes.
I was just going to wrap the show really quickly.
There we go. Let me get a little better angle of the room there. So the degree in the background. The straight up power, my power, middle of the day, sunny day, and my power just went out.
Yeah, it's beautiful in Georgia. And there goes your power. All right, so we were saying I said Monty Rice Buccaneers. I thought he'd be a good backup back there.
I like that. That's a very good spot for him, actually.
Mark Webb, I said Ravens, and I know that that's a storied defensive team, but that's the kind of guy that can make an impact on special teams for them and potentially find a way to a spot. You never know.
That and Seahawks is another one for me that who have traditionally just liked bigger, more physical corners.
And then Richard LeCount, I said the Colts. I'd like to see him play on the turf. I think that'd be fun on his, for him for special teams.
That's a very good comparison because you think back maybe a decade ago, Bob Sanders wasn't there long because of his size and he was just hurt all the time. But when he was there, he was a very impactful player for them. I also thought with LeCount as a Raven, just as that ball hawk got Raven Steeler type NFC or AFC North player. Very physical, no fear, that kind of realm.
And I think we agree one of these guys will find their way to the Giants just because if it's not going to be one of these guys, then like Trey Hill is going to be a Giant or something.
The Giants or the Patriots, they're going to take a Georgia player. It just happens.
Well, Brent, man, appreciate you hopping on, even though your power grid failed in the middle of April in Georgia.
Sadly, it didn't come back on either. So who knows what happened? Maybe somebody cut a wire somewhere that they didn't need to.
Well, your dedication to this show has been proven because if it were me, I'd probably go investigate why I don't have power. We can wrap here and appreciate your time. Like I said, we'll do this next week with Azeez Ojulari, Ben Cleveland, Trey Hill, and Trey McKitty. Maybe even a little bit of Justin Fields and Jamie Newman talk, although We'll have to see if we have time for that or if we just really have interest for that. I know we would. Fields, Jamie Newman. I think his draft stock has dropped pretty heavily. Brent,
Yes.
thanks for doing this. And
Appreciate it.
we will see you next time. Thanks for watching us on our UGA Sports YouTube channel. Please subscribe and support what we're doing around here, and check out what we've got going on over